So welcome everybody here and everybody there. The topic tonight is practice. And I've done a lot of thinking about that, and what does it even mean to practice mindfulness? If mindfulness is about being like alive and aware, what does it mean to practice it? And sometimes it comes up, is it important to have a formal practice where you have a regular time and a place where you do your practice, whether it's sitting or something else? Or is it enough to have an informal practice? That is, when things come up, you remember to be mindful, or you know to pause, or you can do a kind of a quick in the moment body scan or something like that. But that's a question that comes up, and sometimes I run into people in town. I haven't been teaching the in-person class for like 4 years. So when I run into somebody who's done the in-person class, it's been a while since they've done it. And almost always it's the same conversation. I mean, it has the same form. You catch up a little bit, and then they'll kind of look sheepish and they'll say, well, I haven't really been meditating. And then we'll talk some more and realize that something has happened. They have been doing things. They do have an informal sort of practice. And they'll say that there are times when they're in a stressful situation, they'll remember to pause and use that stop thing, or they'll actually notice they're eating something when they're eating, or it'll come to them that at the time they can just kind of check in with body and and heart when they're with somebody, and make it more mindful, more intimate exchange. But it's been my experience, the people who do the class, whether they do it in person or online, only a few actually develop a steady daily type of practice, and the people I would run into would often say, and they kind of would want to have a daily practice, but just hasn't happened. It's just too hard to make that happen. So that's kind of what this is about tonight. So if you've been thinking about you would like to have more of a practice, a regular practice than you do, but you haven't, and you're just kind of on the edge, and well, it would be nice, but just hasn't happened yet. Maybe tonight will push you over the edge, one way or the other. And whatever direction you fall off on, it's okay.
That's right.
Because it's not. Jack Kornfield used to say, he'd say when you're training yourself to have a regular practice, you want to think of it like training a puppy. When you train a puppy, at the end of the training, you want the puppy to like you. You want, and the same thing's true in meditation. You want it, in your own practice, you want it to be something that's friendly to you, not something that's a chore and something that's awful. So by the end of the night, we'll look at some videos that will talk about what meditation does specifically to the brain. That's kind of interesting. I'll say something about it before we watch them. Yeah. So what does happen is when I see, because I get these letters from people who've done the course. There's now like over 2,000 people that have finished the course online, which is pretty amazing. It's an intense course.
In Spanish too?
In Spanish, a couple hundred. About 250 done it in Spanish, and they've done all the readings in Spanish. They've done it through the Spanish version of the course. And almost always they'll say something like, I've did all the practices, and then sometime during the 8 weeks, it says, I noticed some things starting to happen. I didn't expect it. Just out of the blue, I was having a conversation, and all of a sudden, instead of it putting me on edge because it was a difficult conversation, I just settled in, and must have had something to do with the practice, but I don't know exactly how that happened. And it seemed, and they write it sometimes like it's sort of accidental, but of course it's not accidental, but it is kind of from the inside out.
It is exactly like the dog, and taking the dog to practice, and the dog goes home, and at first you think the dog didn't learn anything going to dog practice, and then all of a sudden the dog remembers some of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And when it happens like that, then I consider that to be, it's not only is it not accidental, it's more significant than something you kind of made happen. I'm going to try to be mindful now, and that doesn't always work out like you like it to. So when it happens from the inside like that, it's more embedded, more authentic. But this idea of practice is really I was thinking about it, kind of a contradictory thing, and most of you here all of you here who have been in the in-person class that I taught here in town. I never wanted to force people to practice. There was a couple of classes where I actually asked for practice sheets. I collect them. I thought, well, I don't really want to do that. It's kind of shames people, because not everybody does practice.
You didn't ask our parents to sign it.
I didn't ask your parents to sign. But it's kind of an interesting thing, and it's because I have the philosophy, and in MBSR we teach this, and that's part of the ground that the course comes out of, is you're really all right the way you are. There's no need to change. You don't have to fix anything. In a natural course of life, things may iron themselves out, but it doesn't have to be a project to fix things to the point where it becomes a chore. It becomes like a mission, and so you're not really able to be anywhere because you're always trying to get to be the next best thing. And it's kind of contradictory that way. Say just it's okay to be the way you are. There's nothing you need to change, and yet you can practice. The book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Sunri Suzuki wrote it, and it's an interesting thing in the beginning of that book. It's the editor had taken talks of his and put them in the book, and worked with Suzuki to make sure that he was portraying things accurately. And some of the times he would meet with Suzuki and his wife, and the editor was saying, you never really talk much about enlightenment. And his wife just laughs, and she says, well, that's because he's never experienced it. And they all laughed. And for him, that wasn't the point. It wasn't the point of getting somewhere. It was the point of just being where you are, which may not look like an enlightened state. It's just where you are. And there's a story that one of his students asked. Says, well, you always talk about us being perfect just the way we are, but then you talk about practice. How does that even relate? Isn't it one or the other? Either we're okay or we should practice. He said, well, you are perfect, and there's always room for improvement. So practice is, we think of practice often in this context as being a sitting practice, but there's hundreds of types of practice. And this thing you can't quite read on your sheet, which you'll be able to see on the website, maybe see that in the camera, is Mirabai Bush's, which she calls the tree of contemplative practices. And sitting meditation is there in one of the corners, one of the branches, but there's all kinds of other things: journaling, dance, yoga, mindful walking, or hiking. Music and singing. She doesn't have art there, but she should. That could be one thing too. That's a very meditative kind of practice. Working involved can be, absolutely. So when we talk about practice, we're also talking about that. But the practice is really kind of a strange thing. We were just talking about how you do this thing, and the doing of it, the sitting or journaling or art or whatever, or mindful walking, whatever you're doing, while you're doing it, it isn't like it all comes together while you're doing it, but it's creating a context, kind of a bed in which things can happen. And then when they happen, it's kind of, oh, it must be kind of related. It's almost even mysterious. Years ago, actually, I look back and to see how long ago it was. A little over 20 years ago, I went on my first 7-day silent retreat, and Lauren was a little curious about that and kind of baffled, actually. She says, "So why are you going?" I said, "Well," and I couldn't think of a better answer. I said, "Well, it's to be here now." And she says, "Oh, so you're telling me you're going to drive for 7 hours to Portland, and you're going to be 7 days without seeing your wife or your 11-year-old child, and that's being here now? How does that work?" So she had me, and I didn't know how to answer that. So I went on the retreat anyway, and I came back. And the next morning after I'd gotten back, we're sitting over breakfast right at that counter over there. And we'd both noticed something had shifted for us, and our relationship had shifted. And during the entire retreat, literally nothing major came up about relationship. It's, this is what, it was just stuff, just kind of stuff kind of cycling through. And Lauren says, something's different. Things feels smoother and easier between us. I don't know what it is. Things didn't seem bad before, but I don't know what happened over there. But if you ever want to do a retreat again, I won't give you a hard time next time. So that was a retreat, but the kind of transformation that can happen in a retreat can also happen with a regular practice, which we're talking about a little bit tonight. And the operative word there really is regular. If you're going to develop a practice, then it's way better to have a regular daily 5-minute practice than it is to do a 30 or 40-minute practice once in a while, once every, a few times a week or something. So the regularity is really important. And it's so cool. I get letters from some of these students, and this is one I got a couple of days ago. Somebody's writing after she'd done the course and been just living life after the course, but she actually did develop a little bit of a regular practice. And she says, here's what I've learned. She says, it's about consistency and regularity. It's about practice, not perfection. Sometimes the difficulty of doing practice is it doesn't feel like you're doing it right. If you're really doing it right, it would be smooth and you wouldn't have a lot of thoughts. But she says it's practice, not perfection. It's a metaphor for life. Ever-changing, up and down, joy and sorrow. All of these I've experienced in my mat going through the course and beyond. And then she goes on to say, she says it's been, and her life is not easy. She says it's been a solace for me where my diseases take a back seat and I focus purely on breath, because she does a breath meditation. She says, and she has Meniere's, so she says neither Meniere's disease nor my migraines will kill me, even if each is horrible. However, staying with my breath, I find relief from symptoms, most especially the symptoms, meaning the kind of the things we put on top of the symptoms of fear, loss, grief, I'm not good enough. And this gives me new awareness that I'm not my disease. My disease simply lives inside of me, and I have a choice about how much attention to pay to it. Isn't that cool? So the videos tonight, I did my usual gathering more stuff than I could possibly do in 25 minutes. So I got some pieces of things. And the first one is Shauna Shapiro. It's actually part of the course, but it's such a great piece. And she's talking about how regular practice can nudge what the psychologists call it happiness set point. Do you know about that? They call it, and psychologists understand this sense of how happy you are as being something that everybody kind of has one. It's like a weight set point. You always come back to that. Something good happens to you, you come back down. Something bad happens to you, you come back up. And you probably know people who are just generally happy no matter what happens to them, or generally sad no matter what happens to them. And what she's talking about in that video piece is that what they had understood to be a set point that you always come back to, it's actually movable. It's not a trait that has to stay the same way, and what can change that is practice. And she gives a little bit of insight about that. And the other little piece that we'll look at is there's a Harvard neuroscientist, Sarah Lazar, who started out very skeptical. She was told that this meditation was a great thing, yoga in her case, and she should look into it. And she drug her heels and didn't want to do that because it was a kind of physical therapy thing, and found that some amazing changes had happened, and her whole scope of research changed to focus on brain changes based on meditation. Just something's happening here. And in that piece, you'll see a graph where she says, here's the brain, prefrontal cortex, and normally with age, our prefrontal cortex, it kind of degrades. It's where our attention is and where our planning is. And as we get older, it kind of thins out. and you'll see this graph where a 50-year-old meditator is this place in the graph, and a 25-year-old non-meditator is the same place in the graph. The 50-year-old's brain, if you understand it that way, hasn't lost what it had at 25 years just from a regular meditation practice. And the final little video that I've got for us to look at is by Willoughby Britton, who teaches at Brown, and she's both a neuroscientist and a clinical psychologist. And she talks about what we do practice, almost all of us, some of us almost all the time. And she says we are the Olympic champion of self-criticism. Because that's what comes up. Oh, I didn't do that right, or this is wrong. We do that to ourselves, and that's practice. And she makes the point that what you practice grows stronger. And with a meditative practice, you can counteract that, so you can be more friendly with yourself rather than being so critical. And I had a final one that I still have that Pema Chodron did that I wanted to share with you, but I couldn't fit it in with the 25 minutes, so I like to get the videos in. So I'm sneaking it into the meditation. It's audio anyway, and it turns out it's a perfect way to do the meditation. So when we do the sitting meditation here, usually we have the last half or so be silent, and the first half is my voice, guidance. This time we'll have a voice guiding us, but it'll be Pema Chodron. It's not actually a guided meditation. She's just talking about meditation. But her voice is wonderful, and if you just use that as sort of the object of your meditation as you sit there, and just like you're following breath, you just kind of follow her voice, and if your mind goes off somewhere else, you can come back to her voice. And it'll be interesting as you do that, if you check in with yourself, because you might discover that some of the things she's talking about in meditation is happening with you one way or another. It kind of diffuses some myths we all have about how meditation is supposed to be. After her talk ends, there'll be a kind of a quiet chime, and I'll come in and let you know there's be about maybe 8 or 10 minutes more of silent meditation. So just make yourself comfortable, however that is for you. And we'll just take a minute to notice how it is to be sitting here, how it is to be here. Just feeling your feet on the floor or on the couch. Feeling how you're settling into the couch, however you are. And as you check into body, you'll notice that it isn't just you receiving something from your body. There's also kind of a reaching out to what's happening in terms of body sensation. Kind of like it's like a gentle touch. It's like you checking in with it, saying how it is. How are my feet right now? How's my back? And what's it like to have my arms resting in my lap or along my sides, or hands clasped together? And when you're ready, just finding breath, wherever that is for you, whether you're sensing in your chest or your belly or your throat or your nostrils. And there's really no wrong place to feel your breath. It's just noticing how it is right now. And in a minute, I'll start the tape with Pema Chodron, and you'll use that for it's a 10-minute talk. So use that as your object of awareness. So you just come back to that if you catch yourself wandering a bit, and maybe reflecting on your own experience as you listen to her description of meditation, how some people see meditation, noticing what it is like for you right now as you're listening.
Myself and many like me who have been meditating for, well over 20 years, sometimes we do this for a very long time and we really don't have any idea why we're doing it. So one of the most commonly asked questions of the meditator in the middle of a difficult sitting period is, why am I doing this? So I'd like to give a talk on why we meditate. First of all, we do not meditate in order to be comfortable. Which is to say, we don't meditate in order to feel good. I hope shock waves are passing through the hall. If the purpose of meditation was to feel good, most of us would feel we were doing it wrong most of the time. The purpose of meditation is not to feel bad, however. You'll be glad to know. But really to have an open, compassionate attentiveness to whatever is going on. So an image that's often used is like a big sky, just allowing a lot of room for anything to arise and dwell and pass away. Good and comfortable and pleasing and difficult and painful and unwanted, all of this. So the essence of the meditation is training in something that is pretty radical and definitely not the habitual pattern of the species. And that is to stay with ourselves no matter what is happening, without putting on top of it labels of good and bad, right and wrong, pure and impure. So if meditation was about just feeling good, I think all of us secretly hope that is what it's about. And therefore, a very common experience of the meditator is in a typical day, or a typical retreat, when you're feeling bored, restless, when your back is hurting, your knees are hurting, your mind is hurting, you feel like you must be doing it wrong because it's such a difficult experience. So I think that's the main thing, to get through your head. Get it through your head that it's not about feeling good, it's about a compassionate openness or a kind of ability to be with oneself and one's situation through all kinds of experience. So it's sort of whatever life presents you with, you're open to that. And this is pretty radical. This is common to all Buddhist meditations. It's about touching the earth, as I say, or coming back to being right here. And I think that's also common to various other kinds of meditation as well. But certainly not common to all meditations, because there are also other kinds which you may prefer, which are more about achieving special states and somehow transcending or rising above the difficulties of life. But this meditation that we're doing, and the whole approach in terms of widening the circle of compassion, is an openness of the heart and mind to the difficulties and the joys of life, just as it is, right now, in this very moment. Just to make it maybe easier to remember, I'm going to talk about 5 qualities that are, over the months and years as we meditate, qualities that are being nurtured and come forth more and more as we meditate. And so when you ask, why are we meditating? The first quality, what we're doing when we meditate, is to cultivate or nurture steadfastness with ourselves. I was talking to someone about this and they said, is that sort of like loyalty? And in a way it is like loyalty to oneself. And actually it's steadfastness with oneself, which translates immediately into steadfastness or loyalty to one's experience of life as one finds it. So let me talk a little bit about this first quality of steadfastness, because I think it's so important. It means that you sit down to meditate and you experience what's happening in that moment, which could be speed, mind just going 100 miles an hour, body twitching, bumping, and, very like that. That's it. That's what you experience. And sometimes you can sit there for an hour and it doesn't get any better. So then you'd say, bad meditation session. Right? That's what we say, right? I just had a bad meditation session. But the willingness to sit there for the 10 minutes, the 15 minutes, the 20 minutes, the half hour, the hour, however long you sat there, that is a compassionate gesture of developing loyalty to oneself or steadfastness with oneself. Do you see what I mean? You're sitting there, your mind is going wild, you're very speedy. If you reflect on it, you say, yeah, this is a bad meditation experience, or I didn't chill out the way I thought I would. And so we lay a lot of labels, opinions, and judgments on top of what's happening. Well, that's why you just let those thoughts go and you're just there. That's why the training is to do that. So in a way, part of the steadfastness is that when you notice that your mind is going 1,000,000 miles an hour and you're thinking about all kinds of things, there is this uncontrived moment that just happens without any effort of just coming back. And at that moment, if you catch that, then you say thinking and you're just right there. So, people love to tell the story of they sit down with this dedication to do the practice, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere comes, and they've been thinking the entire time. But at that moment, you catch yourself, right? So 1 out of, how many ever seconds that was is not bad. So the idea isn't at that point to say, I blew it. And that moment you realize that you were thinking the whole time, and that's it. There's a growing awareness of what's going on. So in one sense, it's this growing awareness. It's important when we ask why we meditate. It's this developing or nurturing, bringing out this quality of loyalty or steadfastness or perseverance, whatever word you want to use, I like to use words that have some kind of compassionate sound to them, but it really means willingness to stay. And that is very revolutionary and very unhabitual and not what we generally do at all. And so we're training in this.
And the rest of the meditation will be silent. You can either carry on with what was happening in you as you listen to Pema, or make it a breath meditation, or just however you'd like to use the next 8 or 10 minutes. It's your meditation.